Welcome to our podcast, Death, a Changing Industry. Today we have the great pleasure and honour in speaking with Sylvia Tidy-Harris, who is the CEO of Tidy Management and patron of Child Bereavement UK. Sylvia, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. So before my questions, could you please give us an insight into your background?
Golly gosh, it always feels very embarrassing to sort of brag about yourself. I'm Sylvia Tidy-Harris. I run a talent agency called Tidy Management. I'm also the founder of the speakers agency, which I recently sold. I look after a variety of people, including Merlin from First Dates and Kerry Danes and Dickie Arbiter and various other people. I really enjoy what I do.
Oh, well, thank you for that. From my research on you, it's incredible the work that you've done and achieved. So huge, well done. You're also a patron for Child Bereavement UK, which you didn't mention that's a huge achievement as well. So what is your involvement with Child Bereavement UK and how did you get involved with them?
I'm terribly proud of my involvement with Child Bereavement UK. I got involved after meeting the CEO Anne Chalmers and her sister Maureen on a trip actually in Egypt of all places. I explained about what had happened to my late brother Nick Tidy, who died in Malibu in 2004. What had happened to his children and the process they went through with therapy and so forth. We fast forward 19 years. It kind of worked in one way, but it didn't in another, and there are still obviously lasting effects on both of them, and particularly my niece Scarlett. I wanted to very much get involved with them and very kindly invited me to join the charity, and here I am nearly 10 years later and very proud to be a patron of such an incredibly effective and hardworking charity.
What they do is incredible. I was recently appointed as funeral industry advisor to them, so I share your passion for the work they do.
And the fact that they're educating teachers who often don't even have any bereavement training, and I know of one school who did use them, and my friend was the deputy head, and nobody had any training, and that was in a large academy, so it is quite concerning. Teachers aren't the only people, they help all sorts of practitioners deal with this, and I think it's spectacular.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and we spoke beforehand about the work that I've been trying to push through Parliament about education in schools, which I'll come on to, which ties into what you're saying there. Regarding your niece and nephew, you mentioned the support they received. What support did they receive then, and how did it help, and how do you think it could have been improved?
We're talking about an American system, which I'm not very familiar with. My brother Nick died in his sleep one night. There was really no explanation other than his heart stopped. And so the children woke up late, ran upstairs and found their dad. My nephew went up first and called his sister. They were 9 and 13 at the time. My sister-in-law was in South America with work. So they called the next door neighbour who came over, called 911, and the rest is, history. But the kids were remarkably okay in those first few days. My sister-in-law told me that the therapy was good for the 9-year-old because at 9, he wanted to tell me what the other dads had died of. One guy's dad died in a car crash. One guy's mum was hit by, all these different things. Whereas for the 13-year-old and a girl and the firstborn and her father's little princess, it was incredibly hard. Nick brought Scarlett up. That added to the actual impact on her. What concerned me most was that my nephew really didn't understand the magnitude of it, but it caught up with my niece with a serious effect. My sister-in-law attended therapy. She said the only good time for her wasn't the therapy for herself, but it was meeting the other parent that had been left whilst waiting for the children to come out of their counselling sessions. And she said that did do them some good, which is really interesting.
So connecting with other people really who are in those circumstances as well. I'm a believer in learning about the emotions that we can go through when we lose someone prior to the event, and that being taught in schools. Do you think this can help society at all? And what's your view on having those sessions taught within schools?
My feelings are that this is down to families. However, we need to educate people in schools in order for the next generation and the generation after that to be comfortable about talking about it in families. Our family, for instance, we grew up knowing that Dad wanted to be launched off an aircraft carrier with smoke canisters attached to his ankles. So for us, death wasn't a taboo subject. It was there all the time. And I suppose the influence of my mother's family, she was born and brought up in Naples in Italy. Death is so quick and sorted in Italy. You know, you're buried in 24 hours. When my grandfather died, Mum and I had to catch a flight and literally get there within 24 hours, or otherwise he would have been buried before we got there. So I had that influence in my life as well. But so many children don't. And I think that until parents actually talk about it, schools need to educate those parents to be.
I agree that families would be the key to discuss it at home, but as you've just said, unfortunately, the vast majority of people are unable and are not capable to discuss death. That's why we have to go to the source. And I think it'll take 2 or 3 generations until it is more normalised within the family home. But no, thank you for sharing that, Sylvia. That's really insightful. What advice would you give someone who's going through a loss and there are children involved?
It's such a hard one, very difficult. What happened with my sister-in-law, she was amazing. She put them before herself. And I think that that probably brought her great comfort that the children were there for her to concentrate on. My husband was widowed first time round, and I think it's harder for men in many cases if the man is hands-on but not in that intense way that a mother is. That's not saying that dads aren't brilliant carers. And I know for a fact that had it been the other way around, my brother would have coped incredibly well as well. I don't think, and it must be so hard, that the parent can collapse into themselves so much because the children are the ones that need such support at a time like this, because it will map out the rest of their life, how they're treated and how they are looked after in those initial days, weeks and months.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And solid advice, isn't it? And the answer is there's no clear answer, but just being aware, isn't it? Being present, I think, is the key.
It was interesting seeing it from an American perspective as well, in my case. Literally, there was food being ordered from restaurants and just turning up. There were meals arriving, and that doesn't happen so much in the UK. I think that whenever there's a bereavement, somebody should set up a little spreadsheet on behalf of the family so that they never have to think about food. Not that you particularly want to eat that much, but particularly if there are children involved, there should be food there. And also that the parents, if people offer that you know and trust to take the children out so that you can grieve yourself, I think that that's also very important, because you need your friends and family around. They also need people to help.
And with that, Sylvia, it interests me because you're totally right. I totally agree with you. And Child Bereavement UK say, don't they, if someone's struggling, take a bowl of lasagna round to someone's home. Why in this country, in the UK, why are we so terrible at communicating? What is it? Why are we like this?
It's the typical curtain twitching, but not willing to help. That British thing of better not get involved. Other than what you would call old people, like your elderly grandparents, I was blessed. I hardly knew anybody who'd passed away. So when I got the news that my brother had died, it was such a shock, and it was so sudden as well. And I didn't have time to grieve because I was so busy looking after mum and dad, who, as you can imagine, were like, doesn't matter whether your child's 39 or whether they're, 10. As a parent, it's the same. Fast forward to 2019. I was on a cruise with one of my clients and I got a call saying mum had gone into hospital because she wasn't feeling very well. And when I got there, she was waiting for an operation, and we had some great laughs and jokes while she was waiting. She had the operation. I found my father in the shower. He'd had a stroke and had collapsed in the shower, been there 3 hours. So again, I was 2 hospitals. My mum died a couple of days later. My dad didn't know. I had to tell my dad a week later, which is just the worst thing in the world to have to do. So again, I didn't really have time to grieve. Just too busy doing that. We went into COVID. This time round, losing dad on March the 11th this year, we talked about death so much, the whole family, that maybe my grieving, much to the surprise of my friends who worry about me that I haven't grieved. Maybe I have had time to grieve and I deal with it in the tidy way, which is the way my dad dealt with it is they're just not here. Nick's still in America. Mum's perhaps gone to Italy. I don't know, but I am coping. If I cry, I cry, and if I don't, I don't. But I think grief affects people in different ways, and you can't force grief on someone or a particular style of grief.
To say that you sort of picture them away, but actually from what we discussed beforehand, how you took control during the funeral of your dad's, that example you gave me, could you go through that again, please? Because for me, that is completely
Absolutely, you saw it.
what you did.
Makes me smile. When we lost Dad, obviously he was 89, and whilst he's my dad, we all miss him terribly. You know, it was going to be inevitable at some point, but it's still very hard. I was just shell-shocked and went into the organising of the funeral. And one night I sat bolt upright in bed and said to my husband, I've got this idea and I'm going to do it. And he was like, what are you going to do? And I explained, and he said, that is just the best idea. So went to the funeral home the next day and said, I want to decorate my father's coffin with cartoons, to which they said, oh gosh, that's going to be terribly expensive because you have to have it all, especially digital. I said, no, I want to stick cartoons on the coffin. So we ordered the cheapest coffin, which would have been very satisfactory to Dad. They left it unvarnished and without handles, and we literally stuck cartoons all over the sides of the coffin and the lid, and it looked magnificent. Yep. My girlfriend Rose, who came to help Fred and I, my husband, I had some rude cartoons and she kept saying you can't put those on, and I said I can, because the whole point is that if there was humour in the trenches and there was humour in times of great suffering, there could be humour on my father's coffin. Bill Tidy had Bill Tidy cartoons all over his coffin, and I know he would have been so proud. And it had the effect that I wanted, which is when the hearse drew up outside the crematorium and everybody bowed their heads as they lifted their heads up, you could see the surprise on their faces. And at the end, I only noticed this when I watched the video back, because we had so many people who couldn't make the funeral, so they were watching on a live link. People were taking photographs of the coffin and reading the cartoons, and the funeral director was having to move them on and get them out because the next funeral was waiting to come in, chomping at the bit to get through the doors.
Amazing. I'm a big believer in how I arrange and conduct funerals. I try and empower families, and the idea of that is we create these connection points which allow them to move forward with their grief. So I think what you've done there is the ultimate example of taking control of the arrangements, and that will hopefully help you as you move forward. I'm sure it has.
There's also an important thing. At my brother's funeral, my niece, who was 13 at the time, shared her mini eulogy with everybody that was there. And I delivered a eulogy at my brother's funeral, at my mum's, and at my dad's. The one thing that I find utterly unforgivable at a funeral is that there isn't someone to talk about the person. There are great stories in everybody's life, and I just don't think people pass on enough stories to a celebrant or a vicar or a priest who doesn't know the person who's passed away. And there's always someone that you know who'll do it. I do it for loads of my friends, families, if they want, because I just can't bear the fact that their lives aren't celebrated.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm actually involved in a website called Legacy Share, where people can put down their stories and more about their life. So when it comes to that point, you're not just relying as well on a couple of people's views. It's about actually having information from a long period of time, not just, you know, at the time of death. But no, Sylvia, just a huge thank you for an insight into who you are, your experiences, and just well done for everything you're doing. I know Child Bereavement UK are very grateful to have you as a patron. I'm sure we'll meet in the future, both being connected to that great charity. Any final words from yourself at all, Sylvia?
I just hope that anybody watching this that needs the inspiration to be able to broach the subject of death with their children or with their pupils in a sensitive manner and an unscary way, then I hope they can do it, because it doesn't have to be with a heavy religious slant. It's just an explanation of how and when it happens. Not scare children, but just have them a little aware.
I'd say a huge thank you for watching the podcast today. Please subscribe to the channel, as we have some fascinating guests lined up, and please be part of this special journey. Thank you.